Proxima b, you've heard the story. Closest exoplanet. Sitting in the habitable zone waiting to be colonized by us. Maybe another Earth. It gets passed around like good news. But that's the simplified version, the one that sounds comforting. What usually gets left out is the part that makes this planet genuinely unsettling. And as Brian Cox and Neil Degrasse Tyson have both pointed out, Proxima b isn't interesting because it's nearby. It's interesting because of what it tells us about how brutal our cosmic neighborhood really is. Welcome to Simulation Hypothesis. We're space maniacs here, people who love big ideas and aren't afraid to question reality. On this channel, we take bold visions about the universe and back them up with real science and the words of credible scientists. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe and stick around. And yeah, let's argue about space together. Proxima b is real, first of all. Not we think it might be there real. It was announced in August 2016 after a dedicated observing push nicknamed Pale Red Dot, using the radial velocity method, basically watching a star wobble because a planet is tugging on it. And the details are exactly why the headlines went wild. It's a roughly Earth-mass planet orbiting the closest star to the Sun, Proxima Centauri, and it sits in the region where temperatures could allow liquid water, the famous habitable zone. So why am I saying they didn't teach you this in school? Because school tends to teach the habitable zone like it's a green light. Like you find the right distance, you get oceans and sunsets and maybe a second home. But habitability isn't a single checkbox. It's a knife-edge pile of conditions: atmosphere, radiation, magnetic shielding, water history, chemistry, geology, and Proxima b sits under a star that behaves like a troublemaker with no off switch. Here's the first missing piece. Proxima Centauri is a red dwarf. Red dwarfs are small, cool, dim, and they're the most common kind of star in the Milky Way. That sounds great at first. Dim star means the habitable zone is close in, so a planet doesn't need a wide orbit to be temperate. But close in also means the planet is parked right where the star's magnetic tantrums hit hardest. And Proxima Centauri has tantrums. We're not talking about a few cute flares. We've caught Proxima blasting out flares so intense that briefly, the star brightened dramatically in visible light. The kind of event that makes astronomers stop smiling and start doing damage calculations. An ALMA observed a flare that spiked Proxima's brightness by about 1,000 times at millimeter wavelengths over seconds. That's not a vibe. That's what happens to an atmosphere when this repeats for millions of years. Which brings us to the second missing piece. We do not know Proxima b's atmosphere. We don't know if it's thick, thin, Earth-like, Venus-like, or already stripped down to almost nothing. The serious science conversation around Proxima b keeps returning to the same sober idea. Its history and volatile inventory matter as much as where it sits in the habitable zone. That's the part that doesn't fit into a neat textbook diagram. Now let's get to the thing people argue about in comments. Okay, maybe it's dangerous, but it's still close. We'll go there. This is where Neil Degrasse Tyson does what he always does best. He takes a number and makes it emotionally painful. People hear 4 light years, and their brain turns it into a long flight. But even our fastest deep space probes are slow by interstellar standards. A craft moving like Voyager would need tens of thousands of years to cover that gap. And even a light-speed fantasy still takes years, not days, because close in cosmic terms is still absurd to a human body and a human timeline. Brian Cox hits the same nerve from another angle when he talks about scale. He has this way of walking you outward: solar system, edge of the sun's influence, the frozen boundary of the Oort cloud, and then he casually reminds you the nearest star is still multiple light years beyond that. His point is always the same. Human intuition breaks when you leave the backyard. Space is not a road trip with better engines. Space is the place where even the nearest neighbor is basically across a cosmic ocean. So here's what they didn't teach you. Proxima b isn't a second Earth story. It's a story about limits, limits of distance, limits of engineering, limits of environment. And the environment part gets darker the closer you look. Proxima b orbits Proxima Centauri in about 11 days. That's insanely fast compared to Earth's year, and it happens because the planet is extremely close to a faint star. Again, habitable zone doesn't mean Earth-like orbit. It means right place for temperature, maybe. When a planet orbits that close, a big concern is tidal locking. the same way the moon always shows Earth one face. If Proxima b is tidally locked, one side could be in permanent day, the other in permanent night, and seasons, as you learn them, basically don't exist. Now, tidal locking doesn't automatically kill habitability. Climate modeling has shown you can get scenarios where heat gets redistributed enough for liquid water to exist in certain regions, depending on atmosphere and ocean heat transport. But notice what that sentence depends on. Depending on atmosphere. An atmosphere is exactly what Proxima's flare behavior threatens. So let's talk about the ugly physics of living under a flare star. Red dwarfs, especially active ones, can bathe close-in planets in X-ray and extreme ultraviolet radiation and particle storms. Those can erode atmospheres over time, especially if the planet doesn't have strong magnetic shielding or if it started with the wrong atmospheric composition. There are studies focused specifically on Proxima b's irradiation history and what it could mean for water loss and atmospheric evolution. Some scenarios are optimistic. Maybe the planet formed differently than we assume. Maybe it started with more volatiles. Maybe it replenished atmosphere through geology. Maybe it has magnetic protection. Other scenarios are grim. Maybe it got cooked early, lost water during an intense early phase, got stripped repeatedly by high-energy radiation, and ended up dry or airless. And then there's the flare frequency problem. Even if life could exist, could it stay stable on the surface with repeated UV bursts? Some research has looked at how flare-driven UV might affect surface conditions depending on what kind of atmosphere exists, meaning the same planet could be surface lethal or surface survivable based on what kind of air it has. That's the real Proxima b story, uncertainty with sharp edges. Now here's where the school version is genuinely misleading. A lot of people hear habitable zone and mentally picture Earth. But the habitable zone is not a promise of oxygen, forests, and safe skies. It's a temperature concept, mostly about whether a rocky planet could keep liquid water on its surface under some set of assumptions. It says nothing about whether the planet actually has water, whether it kept it, whether it has an atmosphere, whether it has plate tectonics, or whether it's being sandblasted by a magnetically active star. So why did Proxima b become the planet everyone latched onto? Because it's close enough to feel personal. 4 light-years sounds like a number you can imagine. It's not a galaxy away. It's not billions of years back in time. It's the nearest star. And psychologically, that matters. That's why headlines leaned into second Earth. But that closeness is exactly the trap. Close makes people skip the brutal part of the math. Even if you could build a craft that goes a meaningful fraction of the speed of light, not a movie ship, a real one, you run into the same wall your transcripts described. You don't just need speed, you need energy, shielding, and survival against dust impacts where a grain becomes a bullet. And even the most realistic proposals today mostly talk about tiny robotic flybys, not humans stepping onto soil. Breakthrough Starshot is the perfect example. It's one of the few serious concepts that tries to make interstellar mission within a lifetime feel like engineering rather than fantasy. Ultralight sails, powerful lasers, gram-scale probes accelerated to around 0.2 C, then a multi-decade cruise, then a fast flyby and a hard attempt to beam data home. Even in its serious technical discussions, it's clear this is a moonshot in cost and precision. And it still doesn't land, doesn't break into orbit, and doesn't send people. So when someone says, we can live on Proxima b, here's the honest answer. We don't even know if there's an atmosphere to breathe. We don't know if the surface is protected from flares. We don't know if it has oceans, continents, or a global ice shell. We don't know if it has a magnetic field strong enough to matter. And even if it's paradise, we don't have a practical way to touch it with anything larger than a tiny probe in the near future. That's not pessimism, that's just reality. Now here's the part I promise that's more unsettling than the headline. Because Proxima b isn't only about Proxima b. Proxima b is a warning sign for a huge fraction of the planets we're going to find. Because if red dwarfs dominate the galaxy and their habitable zones sit close in, then a lot of potentially habitable worlds are going to live in flare territory. Proxima b is the first time that problem became personal because it's our nearest neighbor and it has that seductive label, habitable zone. That's why this discovery matters even if Proxima b is dead and airless. It forces a bigger question. How many Earth-like exoplanets are only Earth-like in radius and temperature, but are actually nothing like Earth in lived conditions? Tyson has a way of framing this that stings. Habitability is fragile and time-limited, not a permanent gift just because you land in a certain orbital band. Cox circles a similar moral in his own style. The more you learn about Earth, the more outrageous it becomes that it works at all. And once you internalize scale, you stop treating another world like an easy backup plan. So if you want the real, what they didn't teach you, it's this. Proxima b is not a doorway, it's a mirror. It shows you how quickly your brain tries to turn habitable zone into habitable. It shows you how the media turns minimum mass into Earth twin. It shows you how 4 light years makes people forget what a light year means in fuel and time and shielding, in the sheer hostility of empty space. And it also shows you something else, something that's honestly kind of humbling. We are at a stage where we can detect tiny wobbles in a star 4 light years away and infer a planet's mass, orbit, and likely temperature range. But we still can't answer the most human question of all. What is it actually like there? Not yet. But we're getting closer to the kind of evidence that will stop the guessing. Proxima b remains one of the most tempting targets because it's close enough to be the first place we might eventually characterize in detail. A real atmospheric detection, even just there is air or there is no air, would change this conversation overnight. And that's why Proxima b keeps coming back into your feed. Proxima b here, Proxima b there, we can live on it. It's another Earth. Because the planet sits right on the boundary between what we can detect and what we can actually know. So let me leave you with a question that's more honest than, is it habitable? If Proxima b turns out to be hostile, stripped, irradiated, barren, what does that imply about the millions of habitable zone planets around red dwarfs we're going to discover next? And if Proxima b turns out to have an atmosphere, maybe even water, what does that imply about life's ability to survive under violent stars we'd normally call dangerous? Either answer is big. Either answer rewrites our expectations. That's the real reason this planet matters, not because it's our next home. Because it's the closest test of whether the universe is generous or cruel to Earth-like worlds. And next time someone casually says, Proxima b is basically Earth too, you'll know what to ask them. Okay. Which version of Proxima b are you talking about, the headline version or the real one?